Summer is just flying by. It's already almost July. It's July tomorrow, right? Tomorrow's July 1st. And that means today is June 30th. And in terms of life, that means summer is flying by. But in terms of Pitt football, what that means is that today, June 30th, is exactly 2 months away from the start of the 2025 Pitt football season. I mean, it's not, 8 Saturdays from now, but it's exactly 2 months. It's August 30th is when they will open the season against Duquesne at Acrisure Stadium. And I don't know. I sort of feel like, this is, we're 1 month out from camp, 2 months out from the season. Time to sort of reset the conversation, get us all on the same page about what are the biggest issues, what are the biggest questions. I mean, we've been talking about all of this stuff for the past, how long has it been since the bowl game against Toledo? I mean, that was December, whatever it was, either a little before or a little after Christmas. I blacked out on the date, but that was roughly January, February, March, April, May, June, like roughly 6 months ago. And we've been talking about all these issues since then, not to mention during the season as well, and, kind of throughout the offseason. We've been talking about all this stuff for the last 6 months. Now we're inside of 2 months. So we're 2 months away from the start of the season, 1 month away from the start of training camp. What does Pitt need to do this season? What are the biggest questions facing the team? We're kind of reset the conversation so we know what we're all going to be talking about for the next month leading into training camp, but what we're all going to be talking about a lot going through training camp. What are the biggest questions for this Pitt football team? The biggest question marks, the biggest things they have to answer during camp, and the biggest questions that they have to answer in order to have a successful season, or at least answer in a positive way in order to have a successful season. What's on the table for Pitt this year? What are the biggest questions facing the team? We'll do that here on the Monday edition of the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Monday here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You see the website below. Don't click that. That's just an image. Type those letters open a new browser window and type those letters into your browser, Panther-Lair.com, to get the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com, and message boards to interact with other Pitt fans. We provide a lot of content at Panther-Lair.com. I think we'll have some good stuff this week to give you something to talk about, different conversation starters, and then you go to the message boards and you have that conversation. That's where the community is. If you're looking for the best online community of Pitt sports fans, I think you'll find it on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. And of course, our YouTube channel here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's the place we have all of our Pitt video content. Monday through Friday, we have these morning Pitt videos, a little bit of Pitt sports talk to get your day started. We have our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. with me and Jim Hammett and you. You guys jump in the chat screen and post your comments and questions. We interact back and forth. It's a lot of fun. We have post-game shows and press conferences and interviews and all kinds of video content right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe. And that way you'll never miss any of our Pitt video content. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So this season, right? 2 months out from the start of the season, 1 month out from the start of training camp. What's it going to come down to? What is on the line for Pitt here? What are some of the biggest questions that the Panthers have to answer in a positive way in order to have a good season? I mean, we could probably get into a conversation about what their ceiling is or how good this season could be or what it needs to be. And we've already seen, the over-unders probably, what was it when it came out, 5.5 or something like that. That typically is where most over-unders are for Pitt, 5.5 to 6.5, year to year. And I think more often than not, they do exceed those over-unders and they land on the over side of the over-under. But what do they need to do, in order to get to the over? You know what I mean? To get to 8 wins, to get to 9 wins, to get to 10 wins or whatever it may be. And we'll talk about where that ceiling is probably at some point over the next month, right? We'll talk about where they could potentially get to or how the schedule sets up or, where they could end up. What should we expect record-wise? I'm probably going to say 8-4. Spoiler alert. I'm probably going to say 8-4 because that's what I always say. That's just a good number to settle on. And then you see what happens in the bowl game. But today, what we're talking about is the questions. What questions do they need to answer? Like, what are the biggest talking points about this team? Like, if you run into a friend and they say, hey, how's Pitt looking for this year? These are the things that you want to talk about. And the first thing, as always, because it's football, and particularly because it's Pitt football in 2025, the biggest thing, as always, is the quarterback. It's the quarterback position. It's all about that quarterback position. There's a lot of elements that affect the quarterback position. There's a lot of things that get, the quarterback touches and a lot of things that touch the quarterback and affect how the quarterback plays and impact how the quarterback plays. Obviously, other positions play large into it, and, the offensive line, the offensive coordinator, the wide receivers. All these things are relevant factors, but it really comes down to whether or not your quarterback is a stud and whether they play like a stud. Because at points last season, Eli Holstein played like a stud. And when he played like a stud, Pitt was really good. When he didn't play like a stud, when he played like a dud, because that rhymes, Pitt was bad. And downright bad. And it wasn't necessarily just a game-to-game or first half of the season, second half of the season. As we've pointed out, the Cincinnati game was all of the Eli Holsteins at once. It was extremes all around because for the first 40 minutes, he was bad and Pitt stunk. I can still remember seeing tweets during that game, and you should never read social media during games. It's never good. You shouldn't post on social media during games. It's fun to do it, but there's always overreactions and freezing cold takes and all of that. But halftime, most of the way through the third quarter, a whole lot of the online conversation was, is there any way Pitt can get out of Pat Narduzzi's contract? Because clearly this whole experiment is over. Clearly 10 years is long enough to know that it's just not going to work. And again, I try to stay away from making big, broad proclamations, big, grand proclamations in the middle of a game because lots of things can happen. I can still remember, I don't know why this is such a vivid memory, but the 2012 game against Virginia Tech. I think Virginia Tech went down the field and scored. Now, at that point, Pitt was like 0-2, I think. They had lost to Youngstown State and got crushed by Cincinnati. So they're playing Virginia Tech, who was still ranked, that natural preseason Virginia Tech ranking that they're entitled to. And they went down and scored on their first possession. And I remember somebody tweeted Pitt's defense is showing once again they can't stop anybody. And Pitt then after that possession went out and controlled the game and dominated Virginia Tech and won the game. So I try to stay away from that. But the people who were watching this Cincinnati game, the Pitt-Cincinnati game last season, who said the Narduzzi era is cooked and Eli's not very good, I couldn't, in good conscience, disagree. Maybe a little bit less about the era, but Eli Holstein, who looked like he might be pretty good against Kent State, looked terrible. And I distinctly remember myself sitting here watching that game and thinking, yeah, he's not the guy. This isn't going to work. Well, let's see what Nate Yarnell can do, because this guy is bad, because he was playing really poorly until the final 20 minutes when he was really good. Really good. Looked like one of the best quarterbacks in the country. He was dominant there. Played pretty well against West Virginia. Had his moments, ups and downs, but had the heroics at the end of the game. Went out and crushed whoever they played, Youngstown State or whatever that the FCS game was in week 4, and then went down to North Carolina and got Pitt its first win at North Carolina since joining the ACC. First time Pitt has won down there since the 60s or whatever, 50s or whatever it is, and looked really good. Probably the high water mark of the season was that game right there. Week 5, the win at North Carolina. All things were clicking. The offense was clicking. The defense was clicking. And Pitt looked good. And Eli Holstein looked good. And then you get back into the not so good. He didn't look all that great against Cal. He didn't really look all that great, but he didn't need to against Syracuse. He was doing okay. Probably would have improved against Virginia before he got hurt. And then the Louisville game, he comes out. Or SMU, he really didn't play well, but nobody played well in that game. I guess that was before the Virginia game. Or maybe it wasn't. I forget the order of things. And then the Louisville game, he comes out, takes him right down the field, throws an interception on, in the end zone in the first possession, gets hurt at the start of the next possession. So it's over before it started in that one. And so you have this big question of which Eli Holstein are you going to get? The good Eli or the bad Eli? And if it's a mix of the two, how much do you get of each when it comes to affecting the outcomes of the games? You need Eli Holstein to be really good. And if he's not, Now, there's a sub-question that sort of lurks underneath there. Maybe this whole thing is just going to be about quarterbacks. It's not, but a lot of this season comes down to what the quarterback position does. Because the sub-question to the whole matter of Eli Holstein and what he's going to do this year is, what's the leash like? How quick is the hook? Now, I mentioned that Cincinnati game. Like, a lot of quarterbacks would have gotten benched for the way Eli Holstein played in the first 40 minutes of that game. Eli Holstein did not. Pat Narduzzi looks like a genius for keeping him in because he ended up playing great and winning the game. If he plays like that again, if he comes out against, whoever, take your pick, hopefully not Duquesne, but if he comes out against West Virginia in week 3 or Louisville in week 4 or Boston College or any, down the stretch, down the line of these ACC opponents, if he comes out and plays like that, like he did against Cincinnati, how quick is the hook? How quick do they go to Cole Gonzalez or Mason Heinschel? And I don't know the answer to that question, but it is a question to consider, and it's sort of a question that lurks underneath that question about how good the quarterback can be. And those are huge questions when it comes to figuring out how good Pitt will be and the success that Pitt will have this season. Now, of course, we can't talk about the quarterback without talking about the offensive line. And that's another big question facing Pitt this season. And the thing I've said throughout the offseason, I'm trying to collect all of the thoughts that we've put in different places over the course of the offseason and put them all in one place right here. The thing we've said about the offensive line all offseason, and we probably said about the offensive line during the season and in December when they were going into the transfer portal, that it wasn't just about upgrading the starting 5, which they may or may not have done. But it's also about upgrading the depth, because the problem last year wasn't necessarily the starting 5 wasn't good enough. They were probably good enough, not without their weaknesses, but probably good enough. The problem was when Branson Taylor got hurt, it threw the whole thing into chaos. Where you've got Terrence starting at left tackle, and you have there was somebody else who started at left tackle. Maybe it was just that they then moved Ryan Baer from right tackle to left tackle, and then they were starting Jackson Brown at right tackle, and they started Isaiah Montgomery at right tackle, and they're moving guys around, and they're all this shuffling in and out at a position where you need cohesion and consistency more than any other spot. You need those guys to be comfortable working together. They weren't that great to begin with, and then you're mixing and matching all the time. I mean, you weren't really giving them a chance to succeed. And this has been a problem for Pitt in the past, but in the past they've had Mackensalves waiting in the wings. So when they lost a tackle, when Gabe Hoy wasn't available or Carter Warren got hurt, Mackensalves was ready to step in. And Mackensalves is really good. He's an NFL player. So you're okay there. But they haven't had the depth in some of these other years to withstand an injury. And that was what happened last year. And it went a long way in contributing to the issues that they had in the final 6 games. So this year, have they improved it enough? Have they not just improved the starting 5 enough, but have they improved the depth enough? I think they have. When you look at the players they've added, Keith Gouveia and, Kendall Stanley and, Jeff Percy from Michigan. I knew he was from Michigan. I couldn't remember his last name. Jeff Percy from Michigan. I mean, I think they've added some good quality linemen, and then you go along with Lyndon Cooper and B.J. Williams and Ryan Baer. You get continued development from Isaiah Montgomery and, Ryan Coretta and Caleb Holmes. Like, maybe you've got some decent depth there. Jackson Brown as well. Maybe you've built that out so that your starting 5 should be at least as good as last year, if not maybe a little better. It kind of depends on a few factors, I think. But you're also, ideally better positioned to withstand that injury if it comes. If you lose Ryan Baer, or you lose your starting left tackle, whoever that ends up being, or you lose Lyndon Cooper or B.J. Williams, one of these guys you're going to be counting on, if you lose them, you should be in better shape to survive it. Should be. And, maybe not be as good as you were before the injury, but not be bad enough to lose 6 games in a row and get your quarterback killed and all of that. Should be in that position. We'll see. Like I said, that's one of the biggest questions facing Pitt this season, and it's tied in to the questions about the quarterback. let's see. I'll be honest, most of my questions about this team revolve around the offense. I think along with the questions about the quarterback are questions about Cade Bell as he heads into year 2 of calling plays at Pitt, calling plays, at the FBS level, calling plays at the ACC level. And I'm a believer that systems can translate. I'm a believer that plays are good plays are good plays. And that kind of thing should be able to transfer from one level to the next. I think there are examples of good play callers at the FCS level who came up to FBS and had success. I have no reason to think Cade Bell can't be one of them, but I do think, you always talk about offseason and self-scouting and lessons and all of that. I do think Cade Bell has some growth that he needed to experience over the course of the offseason. That getting into the ACC wasn't like calling plays when you were at Western Carolina. And that's not a knock on FCS. That's not a knock on Western Carolina or anything like that. It's simply saying that you're now facing bigger coaching staffs. You're coaching against guys who presumably are better defensive coordinators, better scouts, who are going to get a better read on what you're doing. And you're going to have to change it up. You're going to have to scout better. You're going to have to game plan better. You're going to have a more specific idea, an intentional idea of how you're going to attack each team independent of how you attacked other teams. While understanding that the teams you're facing are going to be aware of how you attacked other teams. And so you've got to account for that. I think there's a lot that goes into it. I think Cade Bell knows all this. I'm not breaking any news to him, but there's a lot that goes into it. And I think there were probably points last year where the game plan wasn't at the level it needed to be in terms of being tailored to attacking an opponent's weaknesses. I think Cade Bell believes very strongly in his playbook. I think he believes in the strength of his playbook, the creativity of his playbook, and the effectiveness of his playbook. And I think there's a lot to believe in there if you're Cade Bell. But I also think you need to understand that each week's opponent is unique and challenging in its own ways, and they're going to be ready for the things that you like to do. So you better find new ways to attack each opponent. And so that's another big question. I think is how Cade Bell grows and has grown from year 1 to year 2. And that's going to be something that we don't necessarily see all that much. Because even if we see those plays didn't work, there's so many factors that go into it. Anytime, if you want to be reminded of the complexity of a game with 22 people moving on the field at one time, talk to a coach. Ask a coach about a specific play. Hey, man, what happened there? And you'll be shocked at, most likely there's a gap between what you think happened and what actually happened. I'll never forget. I don't know why this ends up being story time all the time, but this is one I always come back to. 2008, Pitt was playing at Cincinnati. All right, this was late in the season, and there was still a chance for Pitt, I think, to win the Big East or claim a share of the title. And Cincinnati, all their fans brought oranges to the game because if they won, they were going to be going to the Orange Bowl, or they were convinced they were. And so, early in the game, maybe Pitt's first possession, they're running the ball down the field with LaShawn McCoy. They are just carving them up, doing a great job. LaShawn McCoy's running well. They're blocking well for it. The running game is working. And they get down, I don't know if they're in the red zone yet, probably inside the 30 or the 25. And they line up. Bill Stahl drops back to pass and gets sacked. And I remember later, maybe the next spring, maybe a year later or 2 years later, talking to one of the coaches. I'm like, hey, man, I don't even know how it came up. But I'm like, you remember that Cincinnati game? You guys are running the ball down the field. And you have Billy drop back to pass. And he gets sacked, and it takes you out of it. I think they didn't even get a field goal out of the drive or something, and they end up losing the game. Not necessarily because of that play, but still. And I'm like, what happened there? Why go away from the run? You're running well. Why not make them stop you? He's like, well, here's what you don't know. I'm like, okay. He's like, we called in the play, and either it was communicated wrong or somebody got the wrong idea, but the protection was set to the wrong side. The protection was set to the right side. It was supposed to be set to the left. And Matt Cavanaugh, the offensive coordinator at the time, anticipated, this is what the assistant coach told me, that Matt Cavanaugh anticipated the blitz that Cincinnati was going to run, had the right call in. And if they set the protection the right way, Jonathan Baldwin is open to one-on-one down the field. They got exactly what they wanted out of that play. But because the protection was set to the wrong side, the whole thing gets blown up. Gets blown up. And on the outside, it looks to us like, what are you doing? It's a terrible call. The call was right. It was just like there's that little detail that you don't realize. And so, we're not going to see, Cade Bell seems like he's really evolved. Like if guys are making little mistakes like that, right? We're going to say, that was a bad play call, or, what are the coaches doing? They didn't have him prepared. Or they didn't do this. They didn't do that. So we won't really know how much Cade Bell grew in the offseason, but that doesn't make it any less important for Pitt heading into the 2025 season. He needs to be better as a game planner and a play caller. And I think he had his moments where he did really well last year, but he's got to have more of those moments, and he's got to do even better in 2025. Those are my three biggest questions. How does the quarterback play? Is the offensive line strong enough and deep enough? And how has Cade Bell grown over the course of, the last season, the last year, the last calendar year? Those are the biggest questions for me. There's other things like, is somebody going to emerge at wide receiver as a playmaker? I don't see it yet. Obviously, on the defensive side, can they get a pass rush out of the defensive ends? We're going to talk about the D ends this week. I wrote about them a lot last week, and there's some stuff I want to talk about this week. So, that's a big question for me. But I think this season, when you talk to your friends and they're like, hey, how's Pitt looking this year? What's Pitt going to look like? How's Pitt going to do this year? That's what you would say. Be like, how's the quarterback? Is the offensive line depth better than it was a year ago? And is Cade Bell, in year 2 of coaching in the ACC, how has he grown and developed and evolved as a game planner and a play caller? Those are probably the three biggest questions this year. I was going to have like 5 questions, but I think those 3 are the biggest, because any other questions I think of are kind of smaller in scale and impact than those. So those are the biggest questions, if you ask me, heading into the season. What did I forget? What's a bigger question than any of those things there? Certainly not the only questions, but what's a bigger question than any of those things there? Leave it in the comments or on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. And while you're there, check out all of our Pitt football, basketball, recruiting, transfer portal, all of that content, Panther-Lair.com, and talk about it on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com so you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. I hope you had a great weekend. It's great to get another week started here. We got a short week with the 4th of July on Friday, but we'll still have a Morning Pitt for you every day because that's how we do. So make sure you like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks for tuning in today. Have a great Monday, and we will catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.